All right, well, I got a couple of seconds into this video and decided we could probably point out some very useful dynamics. Gives us a little bit of substance to analyze, a bit of political dynamics there, a bit of male-female stuff. So let's have a quick look. This is probably also my first genuine, just off-the-cuff reaction video, but let's check it out. I think it will be worthwhile.
Well, today is, of course, the 4th of July. It's a day that America celebrates because they booted we British out, our monarchy out, our mad King George dropped the ball. Otherwise, I would possibly be King Piers right now of the United States of America. So we don't obviously celebrate it with quite such enthusiasm over this side of the pond. But amid the hot dogs and fireworks, even this day of patriotic celebration in the States has become divisive. There's a growing trend for Black Americans to celebrate Juneteenth as an alternative to July 4th. Veteran Congresswoman Maxine Waters in 2021 claimed the Declaration of Independence wasn't for equality and it was only for white men. Her comments were echoed by a fellow Democrat, Cori Bush, who said black people still aren't free. So is there something in all this? Should these national institutions and occasions be opportunities for reflection and apology rather than celebration? Well, joining me now is best-selling author of The War on the West and conservative commentator Douglas Murray, country music legend Lee Greenwood, and my Talk TV contributor Paula Rowan-Adrian, and Talk TV presenter Richard Tice. All right, well, a stellar panel. Douglas, let me start with you. You read a great piece this week for The Telegraph about this weird trend. I agree with you. I think it's weird, where we're being compelled to just apologise constantly for everything that happened in the past.
Okay, I did listen up to this part, but just quickly, the strategy from the left is to undermine, to psychologically and socially undermine you, to undermine your own confidence in yourself, and to socially destroy your reputation, so that to lower your social status so that you are in a weakened state and you give them free stuff. It's not very complicated. We make a big deal over the differences between masculine and feminine forms of aggression. Masculine forms of aggression are very easy to point out. They are physical. Feminine forms of aggression are, as Jordan Peterson has pointed out, social reputation destruction, undermining, gossiping, shaming, moralizing, rallying other people, victimhood, etc. And so I guarantee you that Douglas will present the rational case that we don't actually have any unequal treatment of people institutionally at the moment, and I'm sure the other person that would like to shame us for our history so that they can get free stuff will say the opposite.
Why are we doing this?
That's right. It's a very strange act of masochism, really, and an act of masochism carried out by people who don't seem to know anything. I mean, people talk about the British monarchy having to apologise for slavery. It was King George III who signed the Anti-Slavery Act into law in 1807. Prince Albert gave one of the most extraordinary anti-slavery addresses when the British were still policing the anti-slave trade on the high seas in 1840 to the Anti-Slavery League in London. All of this was addressed 200 years ago. And today, unfortunately, there's a kind of new type of malcontent, and usually also a huckster to boot, who just decides that none of this happened. Usually it's because they don't know it happened. And as a result, they look at our history and everything in our country, right up to just, innocent pastimes like cricket, and they decide to name everything as guilty. And, you could do this to everyone and to everything, but most civilizations and cultures don't behave like this because most of them aren't just masochistic and so self-hating.
All right.
Douglas makes a good point. Obviously, the lesson here is that no good deed goes unpunished. He repeatedly points out that slavery was abolished by Anglo-British people primarily, and we are, as a result, the only ones ever blamed for it. But the trick with all these things is to not see them in the context of the logic of what people are saying. James Lindsay is very well pointed out that the left uses language operationally. They don't use language to describe a concept or an internal logic or something. They use it to affect a change in other people, to gain a certain outcome. And the outcome here, ironically, is that in ending slavery, it showed that us Anglo white guys actually cared about slavery. So quite uniquely, we're the only people susceptible to shaming about it. We're the only people that if you call us bad people or racist, actually care. So it gives you this strange, ironic situation where being the only culture that actually invented the idea of ending slavery and spearheaded, and I think the British spent 30% of their national GDP on ending the practice of slavery, when, you know, Africans, Jewish, Arab, Muslim slave trades dwarfed the Anglo one. But once again, the only thing to point out is that in ending it ourselves, we showed people that we actually care about doing the right thing, and they saw that and still see that as a huge weak spot to be exploited in our psychology to enact the outcome of getting free stuff.
Your response to that?
I actually agree with Douglas about the fact that we don't know enough.
All right. So I listened up to this point, and this is where I decided to do a video on this. James Lindsay, in pointing out the Marxist dialectic technique, he very well points out that the left don't say, no, you're wrong, and take a purely oppositional stance. What they do is quite a elaborate manipulation of language. It's almost like the old compliment sandwich. You know, if you're in a work environment and you really need to criticize someone's lack of performance, instead of going straight in with what you don't like and getting their back up and triggering their psychological defenses, what you actually do is you go in and say, you're doing a great job, which the compliment sandwich, so the compliment on the way in lowers their psychological defenses. Then you say, but I think this could be done better. So then you deliver the payload, and then to soften the blow, if the payload itself, the actual criticism, left any possibility of psychological resistance, you end with a compliment again. But I'm sure you're on top of this, and this is only going to help us all improve as a team. So that's the old psychological trick of the compliment sandwich. Hey, you're doing a great job. This one issue I think could be improved upon, but I'm sure you're more than able to do that, and we'll all move on as a better team if you do. And it's going to be great. So that's the way to tell people what you don't like, or to deliver a psychological payload into their consciousness without sufficiently triggering or doing the best. That's the best you're going to do to stop the triggering of their psychological defenses anyway. And that's what this lady does here. So what I was talking about with the dialectic is that James Lindsay says the Marxist dialectic works in the same way. They don't say, you're just wrong and evil straight off the bat. They say, you've got a point, but here's the thing, we just see it from a higher level than you. And so we're going to incorporate what you're saying, but there's this whole other side of the coin which you're ignorant of, but we're not. And so what they do is almost like psychologically trump what you're saying in their own minds, anyway, not in reality, but as a language manipulative technique. And they say, you know, from this higher perspective where we're actually correct and doing the full accounting, seeing the larger picture of what's going on, you should listen to us. So they always start off with that compliment. And when I heard this lady very predictably do that technique, I thought, this is going to be a great time to point out some of these verbal manipulations. So let's have a listen.
Absolutely right. We don't know enough, and it's important that we do. But part of the knowledge is also understanding the hurt and pain that were caused, not just about the good things. It's not just about the cherry picking. And wrongs are not about being masochistic. Saying sorry is not a bad thing. Saying sorry is actually a very empowering thing to do.
Why does it matter that
All right. We might have to listen to this a couple of times, because this is a perfect example, and I'm glad I picked this video to talk about, a perfect example of the weapons of warfare with which our societies are being deconstructed right before our very eyes. And this lady is obviously an expert in these forms of warfare because she has managed to pack most of the concepts into about a 15-second clip. So we're just going to go back to the start. Bear with me on this, because if you follow my channel, trust me, there's something here you need to learn, and you need to help me make other people learn.
With Douglas about the fact.
So she agrees. So once again, the psychological compliment sandwich to stop the triggering of psychological defenses. So we make a big deal, like I said, about sex differences in cognition. That the left is feminine and the right is, as generalizations, cognitively masculine. So what she's doing here is she's cognitively maneuvering through language. She wants to oppose Douglas, and she wants to put forward a payload of a completely different concept, but she doesn't want that to be immediately apparent, and so she disguises the payload within the seeming Trojan horse of agreement.
That we don't know enough. He's absolutely right. We don't know enough. And
okay, we don't know enough. That is a complete, warping of the concept that Douglas was saying. We're going through this now with the Voice Treaty in Australia. So this is a move from the Australian Indigenous and communist activists to move towards a government body, an advisory body, government-funded bureaucracy, their own house of government, you would say, in all but name, and then treaty and reparations, quite possibly. There's a lot of talk about that, at least, and anyone who knows that you can't trust these people as far as you can kick them knows that that's where the end goal is going to lie. And most importantly, truth-telling. Now, once again, with the left, they inhabit the upside down world. Have you ever seen Stranger Things? The kids venture into this upside down, black and white, demonic world that is literally an inverse of the real world where the evil lurks. This is where the left, and it's honestly, it's a fascinating phenomenon to really wrap your head around. They seem to inhabit this absolute inverted world of concepts. So in Australia, where they're saying we need truth-telling, you can bet your life savings that when they say the words truth-telling, they mean an exact inversion of the concept that you would associate with those words, truth-telling. When they say truth-telling, they mean agreeing with us. Now, once again, we'll just go a little bit ahead before I make the next point.
Important that we do. But part of the knowledge is also understanding the hurt and pain that were caused, not just about the good things. It's not just...
Okay, so part of knowledge is understanding the hurt and pain. This ties into the left being cognitively feminine, cognitively, empathetically feminine. Now, empathy is defined as the ability to read the emotional state in another person and respond appropriately, as opposed to the masculine systematic brain, where systematizing is defined as the ability to understand and comprehend and deduce the underlying rules that govern systems. So what you find is that people with more systematic brains, and it's not just men and women, it's masculine, feminine, and some men have more feminine temperaments, as Jordan Peterson famously says. Some women have more masculine. So it's not this man and this woman, or all men and all women. It is a spectrum between a cognitive bias towards generally feminine empathetic and generally masculine systematic. Now, when you are a systematic brain person, this is the underlying cognitive theory that gives rise to the saying that men act upon the world and women act upon men. Because if you have a systematic brain, your brain is biased towards understanding Systems. The natural world is made up of systems. Logic is made up of systems. You don't emote a bridge to stay up. You understand these systems of physics, gravity, engineering, etc. So to act upon an empirical world, you need a systematic brain. However, the left, being more empathetic, feminine brains, lives within a social world. Their brains are geared to perceive and to move among a world of people's subjective emotional experience because their brains are more empathetically wired. So when she says here, part of the knowledge is understanding the hurt and pain, what she's doing is acting at a fairly typical left-wing, empathetic, feminine-brained person type of thing, where she says knowledge, truth. She conflates the word truth with subjective experience. Now, when you have a sufficiently masculine, systematic brain, you understand that this is an oxymoron. The idea of truth is that it's not subjective. But this is what you're coming up against with the left, is people whose brains, I'm skeptical, can even fully comprehend systems. There's not a lot of evidence that they can free themselves from this upside down inverted reality where their feelings are knowledge or truth. But that's what she's doing. Let's listen again.
Knowledge is also understanding the hurt and pain that were caused, not just about the good things. It's not just about the cherry picking. And
not just about the good things. So what Douglas did in true systematic brain style is said, let's do a full accounting. Let's do a balance scales of the idea of slavery. Well, on the negative side, okay, yes, it was bad, but everybody did it worse. On the positive side, most other people just obliterated other cultures and peoples. We, however, wanted to domesticate and civilize them, which has objectively good points. So he's doing a justice balance scale equation of saying, well, look, it's over. There was good and there was bad. However, this lady doesn't want that, because in a system where Anglo-European people are not endlessly throwing resources at people for her out of guilt and shame, she probably doesn't do so well. So she has an interest, she has an incentive to continue the psychological abuse of people so that she keeps getting money. And she's doing that here by saying, we are hurt and in pain over this over the past of things that never actually happened to me, and that is knowledge. So once again, in empathetic, leftist, feminine-brained style, she's traversing the underworld of the inversion of concepts, and she is conflating truth with feelings. And at the end of the day, it is a manipulation tactic. And Jordan Peterson very famously just came out on a chat with Gad Saad saying that the largest predictor of people who fall for left-wing authoritarian ideas are those who are not very high in verbal intelligence. The second predictor was being female. The third predictor was having a feminine temperament, which means women and men that have a very feminine temperament. And the fourth was having attended a social justice higher education course. But very interestingly here, I have a fair degree of verbal intelligence, and I'm systematic enough to pick it apart exactly what she's doing word by word. I can describe for you the manipulation word for word in real time. But if you can't do that, or if you maybe don't have so much verbal intelligence, you don't unpick this tangled conflation of concepts apart, and you do fall for a verbal psycho-emotional trick like, oh yes, I fully agree, Douglas, but knowledge is also my feelings, and knowledge is actually agreeing with my feelings, and knowledge is empathizing with me and how I feel, so give me money. Let's just have a listen again.
Agree with Douglas about the fact that we don't know enough.
Okay, I agree. Psychological defenses disarmed. We don't know enough. I can guarantee you when a leftist says we don't know enough, she says you don't mean enough. That's what she actually means. She doesn't think that she doesn't know enough. She thinks you don't know enough. But once again, it's like saying when your boss walks in and says, okay, team, we need to do X. That is a psychological disarmament tactic that is designed to bypass your defensiveness at being told what to do, or in this case, being told that, no, Douglas, you don't know enough. Yes, like a child, you know some things, but I'm the adult here and I know all the things. So yeah, let's just go back once again. This is line by line, the destruction of our civilization through verbal, psycho-emotional, conceptual manipulations.
I agree with Douglas.
I agree. Psychological defenses disarmed.
About the fact that we don't know enough.
I agree with you, but you don't know enough. I do, but you don't. But I'm going to say we, because once again, I'm disarming your psychological defenses to what I actually think.
He's absolutely right. We don't know enough.
He is sort of right. He is sort of right. Once again, has anyone ever pointed out to you that, you know, like your wife telling you that she's fine, it usually means the exact opposite. So once again, you need to learn to read the subterranean currents of feminine language to see what she's really saying here.
It's important that we do. But part of the knowledge is also understanding the hurt and pain that we're...
Okay, I have emotions, and that is knowledge. So you can do yourself the full accounting, the pros and cons, the justice scales, and balance up what the end cost or benefit is of slavery. But at the end of the day, I feel this way. And to me, because I'm a leftist that inhabits the upside down world, my feelings are the same thing to me as knowledge. And I desire you to acknowledge that. Another thing too about empathetic brains is and this is where the whole leftist Borg herd mentality, the Borg mind, the hive mind thing comes from, is that empathetic brains desire social connection with other people. And this is why women in general are very sensitive to social conflict. And because they're overtly sensitive to social conflict, they express their incentives and self-interest and their social conflicts covertly, underneath, in the realm of plausible deniability.
Not just about the good things. It's not just about the cherry picking. And
that's what I was going to say, is that, yeah, they desire this social and psychological harmony of agreement. And she's saying, I have emotions and I need you to come over and acknowledge them as truths. So once again, like I said, we're going through the same thing here in Australia, where truth-telling really means emotional acknowledgement. And give me money.
songs are not about being masochistic. Saying sorry is not a bad thing. Saying sorry is actually a very empowering thing to do.
Now, this is another psychological lie as well. And once again, it's a psychological emotional manipulation, which if you can see it in women with their husbands, and unfortunately a lot of men these days are falling for it. They like to try to feminize their man and say, no, if we go to a dress-up party and I dress if I dress my husband up as a gay Barbie, that's not disempowering at all. It's actually a testament to your solidity of masculinity. It's actually a testament to your confidence in your masculinity, that I can completely emasculate you socially and you can just wear it. So once again here, she's saying, no, it doesn't cost you anything to say sorry. It actually makes you a real man. But what the tactic is from the left is, once again, because they live in a social world, they want to go from a social understanding outwards. So in getting you to admit fault She's getting you to admit that you're wrong, and then she's going to build a case from there that you need to correct those wrongs. And so once again, it is a reduction of your social status. Now, the thing is about Anglo-British white guys is we're very systematically brained. We're kind of we've got a higher percentage of autism than other groups. And so while we may build civilizations and technology and space shuttles and computers and airplanes and etc., we're very good with systems, we're often very blind to the economics of social status. And I think underlying that is that we don't like the idea that for the leftist empathetic feminine brain types, they're really driven by power, but they always say that everything's reducible to power. This is a projection. This is how they see things. So when you say, I'm sorry, you're ceding social, psychological power and status power to them. And this has been happening to us Anglo-white guys for a long time. The same way, if you go to a dress-up party with all your friends and family and your wife has dressed you up like a gay Barbie and she's lowering your status, she's emasculating you in front of everyone else, and when you finally get a little inkling of that's what might be going on, she says, no, it just means you're confident in your masculinity. If you can let me humiliate you in front of everyone and all your friends and family, that's just a testament to how much of a real man you actually are and how strong and confident in your masculinity you really are. But I'm telling you now, except for some very specific examples where it may all be in good fun, but generally that sort of thing you see playing out is a manipulation. It is a emasculation, a manipulation. It is lowering your status. It is transferring social power from you to other people. And from that's where they build their case that you must be destroyed and give everything to them. You want to understand one of the reasons why, relationships between men and women are not as optimum as they could be and probably worse than they have been in decades. It is because of these little games, and Western men are so blind to this undermining, this social undermining, this stripping of social status in all these little plausibly deniable ways. And that's exactly what she's doing here. She's saying, no, you can give me that social status. You can give your power to me. You can apologize for yourself to me and to everyone like me, and don't you worry, Toots, that just makes you a real man. And at that point she's having a little internal smirk, because the opposite could not be more true.
Does it matter that a bunch of royals now get forced into issuing grovelling apology? Who cares? How does it change anything? It doesn't do anything, in my estimation, to impact on current slavery where it exists around the world. It doesn't really make any difference to institutional racism as we've seen in certain parts of society.
Okay, Piers is being an Anglo white guy again, and he's saying, well, what does it actually do? What does it actually do? We said sorry, but what does it actually achieve? It achieves a lot. It achieves a lot, Piers. And this is the problem that you and me and a lot of guys like us don't really grasp intuitively. We have to learn it covertly. We have to learn it obviously. Is what it does is it transfers social power. It transfers social status from you to them. This is what's going on, because you might think in your cooperative brain, hanging out with a whole bunch of white guys and being like, well, if you're wrong, that is a true or false question. If I'm wrong and it's actually true, I just say sorry, we reconcile and we move on with cooperation. But once again, you have to understand, Piers, we're living in the upside down, empathetic, feminine, leftist world of not true or false, but power. Think operationally. What does it give you to get your enemies to tell you that they're sorry in front of the whole world. It transfers to you social power, social agreement. This is how they do social construction. And from that social construction, where the lack of power, the you prostrating yourself in front of them, based on things that aren't true, or at best half true, those agreements filter, they ripple throughout the herd, throughout the leftist Borg mind, and they start to generate a feeling that you're weak, and that they can get stuff from you, and they don't respect you, and that they can destroy marriages with you, and that they can take your children, they can start to stand up to you in institutions, they can flout your law, they can badmouth about you from the ground up. It is warfare. That's what it does. And, you know, once again, this is the social equivalent of an army at the gate, and you're stood behind your capital city walls, and you go, I'm sorry, and you open the gate and let them in. That's what's going. It is the social status, psycho-emotional version of that. That's what it does, Pierce. But I forgive you, because I was blind to it as well until I had it pointed out to me.
I don't know what difference it makes. It might make people feel a bit better to see a royal grovelling, but so what?
See, I don't agree with you, surprise, surprise. I do think it makes a difference. I do think it makes a difference that people in power are heard to acknowledge pain and hurt. I do think it's important that...
See, she says people in power. She understands where the power is. They can smell it. And she says, no, it actually does achieve a lot to get the people in power to apologise to me and people like me, because it's a transfer of that power socially.
People in power have taken the time...
Whose pain and hurt are you talking about? It's not people living today. These are going back hundreds of years in some cases, these crimes of slavery and so on. We all agree it was outrageous. It's been debated, really year after year after year. We all know this. I don't think that people have a lack of knowledge. And I'm not quite sure where the apology tour ends. What's the end game here?
So the end game is about...
There is no end game. There is no end game. If these people actually cared about slavery, they'd be bitching and moaning about Africans, Jews, Arabs, Chinese, and everyone else currently doing it right now. It is a operational tactic. It is a maneuver, a social status, psychosocial maneuver to transfer power to them. And it doesn't end. The only way it ends is if people like Piers and Douglas and everyone else listening to this wises up and puts a stop to it.
Ability to
it's like saying Genghis Khan has just ridden over the hill and he's attacking your city. When does that end? Well, it ends when you're dead. It ends when your women are taken as slaves. It ends when all your crops and children are burnt and dead, and the ground is salted where you used to live. It ends when you're an echo of history. That's where it ends. Like any other form of warfare, that's where it ends.
And the true history, not just the part of history that we have been taught. And that is the difficulty. So you're talking about who's the apology for. Well, the apology is for me. The apology is for those who have suffered. The apology is for those who continue to struggle through colonialism and through slavery. And I do think that it's important.
Who continue to struggle. So once again, the conflation of concepts of true versus their feelings. They're struggling with low status because that's who they are, because it's inherent to them.
That royalty are coming forward and saying, we apologise for the part that we...
All right, so is that it? Is that enough? When is enough enough? If we all say sorry today... Hang on.
The British government, when is enough enough? To repay, to compensate slavery.
So if we all say sorry today...
enough?
Well, that's my question to you, and you're not answering it.
When
my point is,
if
we all say sorry today, it was terrible, which we all know.
Yeah.
Can we then say, right, that's done, we're going to look forwards, we're going to be positive, we're going to celebrate our achievements, learn from our failures, and we're done with apologising?
Absolutely. And so how are we going to learn from our failures if we do not understand what we did wrong?
You learn from your failures because that's what we're doing at the moment. The sort of report you had from
How do you learn from your failures if you don't know what you did wrong? If you refuse to accept that you did wrong?
Because the cricket board, the ECB, they've just produced a report. They reported. Some of it was good. Some of it you can criticise or question.
Once again, the systematic Anglo-white guys are thinking, well, we just get rid of systematic racism, discrimination, which we've already done. She's coming at this operationally from a power perspective, as saying, well, when I'm equal to you, maybe we'll stop. When I'm equal in power. But the problem is, look, don't hold people down. That's bad. Doesn't mean that when you stop holding people down institutionally or legally that they're going to become equal. But I guarantee you this woman thinks that as long as we don't have equal outcomes, and this is getting admitted all over Twitter now, especially in the debate around The Voice in Australia, well, we don't have the same political power and money and wealth and housing and material consumption and wealth outcomes, etc. It's like, no, because that's who you are. Because you're not going to be equal. So there was even a lady, a supposed doctor on Twitter who recently said the government's job is to equalize people the same way a doctor treats a sick patient until they're healthy, like the other people who are healthy. It's like they want equalization of everything, regardless of the truth, which they can't bear to admit because it hurts their self-image. Their self-image can't tolerate the truth that they are not inherently equal. You could give them all the money in the world and they will still not build a modern civilization with it because that's who they are. But that's what they think. This is the conspiracy theory they're acting under. So when they say the hurt, and what they mean by hurt is status anxiety, is that I see a whole bunch of white people doing rich white people, modern civilization stuff, and it hurts my fifis. Therefore, slavery, I'm still held down by slavery 200 years ago, so give me all the stuff until my status anxiety goes away. But it can never go away because it's inherent.
Change what happened.
Yeah, I completely agree. Douglas, the problem is we've forgotten how to be genuinely proud of our great countries, both of.
Yes, because we have been demoralized, we have been psychologically abused, we have had all our status and social power drained out of us through psychological undermining. And now we don't have any confidence in ourselves, in our convictions anymore, and that needs to change if we want to survive, if we want to keep the Western civilization that we have built alive.
America and United Kingdom, two of the greatest countries in the world. It's almost like every day now, somebody somewhere, normally on the left, the woke left, is queuing up to find a reason to hate the countries and their histories.
Yeah, but that's, like I said, it's operational. It's a strategy to get free stuff, and they've opened the floodgates. We've shown them that we will fall prey to these psychological manipulations, and we'll hand over opportunities and money, etc., to them. And so they're all charging the gates to get their piece of the pie. It's not complicated.
Well, it's a kind of grievance competition. Your guest earlier just tried to engage in it. I don't know what hurt she believes she's had from slavery. All of this was addressed 2 centuries ago. Everything has consequences. All history has consequences and ramifications. But, if we were to play this fairly, we would at least look at all of the countries around the world that engaged in the slave trade who are simply not interested in any form of reparations. The Ottoman Empire, all the Arab countries who not just traded far more slaves than across the Atlantic, but castrated all the men so that there wouldn't be any more African slaves after them. They worked them to the bone. I see no interest across Africa in paying reparations for selling their brother and sister Africans into slavery or for working them to the bone to the present day. There is slavery across Africa today. In fact, there are more slaves in the world today than there were at the height of the transatlantic slave trade. So some of us are...
I really wish that they didn't take the camera off her face when he said that.
A bit bored of hearing people ripping at closed wounds and then crying about their hurt or their presumed hurt, because everybody could do this. 1 million Europeans.
I wonder if it's because Douglas is gay that I find that they're a little bit more savvy towards this sort of social posturing, and it's because I'm harping on his use of the word bored there. It's boring. When you call someone boring, that is a status attack. That is saying you're boring. You're boring me. It's, you know what I mean. It's a way to siphon their social power back to you. It's an attack on their status, and I think it's very telling because once again, if you're the systematically minded Anglo guy, you're just like, but it's not true. It's not true. It's like you act in this plane of that's true or false. Like the system works or it doesn't. That computes or it doesn't. 1 + 1 = 2. It doesn't equal 90. You know what I mean? But when you go out of that systematic world into the social world, it's all about the economics of status. And so I think it's very interesting that he uses the word boring, and maybe that he is a little bit tuned as a gay man to these sort of undercurrents of social status trading, and therefore can see through the manipulation a little better. Just a bit of armchair hypothesizing there.
Stolen by North Africans over the course of decades of the North African Barbary pirate slave trade. Where would you end if you did that? The answer is you couldn't end, because nobody is alive who has actually suffered the hurt, and nobody is alive who did the wrong. And I'd make one other point, if I may. It's always the countries that people want to come to who are put through this struggle session. Britain, like America and France, are the most desired destinations for migrants worldwide, and have been for centuries. Why is that? It's not because we're racist, it's because we're better. It's because we're good. It's because when we see racism, we actually call it out and recognize it as a sin. Try finding that across Africa. Try finding that across the Middle East or in China. Nobody would hear. So what we have is a situation where the more virtuous countries are presented as the worst countries. It's sick, and most of us are tired of it.
Once again, we're tired of it. But yeah, Douglas is just giving you the blueprint to saving your civilization. He's gone, no, these are our values. He's had the spine to stand up for his values, and that's what we all need to do, really, is just say, no, enough's enough, because they're like children stamping and having a tantrum. At some point, you just have to say, no, that's not how it works. Actually, despite you telling me that I have limited knowledge and that you're the one who has limited knowledge, you're the child. This is our conviction in ourselves. This is our conviction in our values. We're going to stand up for them. We're not going to oppress you. We're not going to be tyrannical. But no.
Douglas.
I
what
am
does she do after
so
this?
sorry that Douglas is bored by the...
See, I told you that after that epic monologue, it was not... And this is great because I'm just like reacting. I haven't watched this whole thing. After that epic monologue, the one word that stood out to her empathetic, socially geared brain was the word bored. It wasn't the economics of, well, they did it more and white people were slaves and how many slaves. It wasn't anything to do with logic or numbers or balancing or justice. It was the status attack of calling her boring. That's what hit home for her. That's what her brain remembered, that one word. And I'm telling you now, it's because it's a status attack. It's a status attack, and that's what really she picked up on as a defensive attack. That's what worked.
pain that has come from...
That's not what he said.
...through slavery.
He didn't say...
I'm
he
so
didn't say
tired.
that. But what you're doing there... Yeah, but hang on,
He
Paula.
is not
Paula, you're being very
bothered.
disingenuous. That's not what...
Yeah, and so she just resorts to lying. This is the funny thing, is you get them all comfy, and they do these little psychological manipulations and blah, blah, but then you attack back, and they freak out, and then it becomes very obvious that they're just talking absolute nonsense. And she says, oh, Douglas said he's bored about hearing about people's pain. No, he didn't. He's blatantly lying. But the other little black pill, I guess you could say, is the way that when you do pick out how absurd their manipulations are, and, like I did earlier, just word for word, this is what you're doing, this is what you're doing, this is what... They just double down on absolute blatant lying. We've seen the same thing in Australia now, where there's the Uluru Statement from the Heart is the document they're referencing for the political maneuvering they're doing now. And they're saying it's a one-page document. It's one-page. No, it had a one-page summary, but then it's got like a 20-page full booklet with the details, the fine print that they don't want people reading. And they're just getting up there saying, well, it's a one-page document. And then you link them. The whole 20-page document, it's just conspiracy theory. It's a one-page. They're lying through their teeth, and that's exactly what she's doing here. She's blatantly lying to save face. And frankly, it's pathetic.
I am.
The viewers aren't stupid. They know exactly what he said. He's not saying he's bored by the pain. He's saying, and I think it's a perfectly valid point, the pain that people who are alive today are claiming they're suffering for what happened 200 or 300 years, it's not a real pain. They're not the ones who suffered what was going on 200 or 300 years ago.
So in terms of justice for all, I mean, I think we'd all agree that there should
I'm
be
not
justice.
suffering from when the Normans invaded.
You have to understand too, once again, we're going back to the leftist upside down inverted world. She's the justice for all. She's talking about status equalization. That's what she's talking about. I want me and all my people and anyone I empathize with to be equal in money, power, resources, material consumption, everything. And you'd be lucky if we even stopped there, because we need to balance out for history. You know, they're even saying now that history is so unbalanced that the only cure to equalize history is to equalize history with future discrimination. So what she's saying is, with all the white people, we want to oppress you, and at some undefined, she's not saying, there were people like Ibrahim X. Kendi are saying this, at some undefined point in the future, when we feel like your historical debt has been sufficiently paid, we may decide to stop oppressing you in the future. Maybe the debt will be paid. Who knows? That's what she's talking about. She's talking about status envy. She's not talking about legal discrimination. She's not talking about protection under the law, rule of law. She's talking about, I currently feel bad, and it is my status anxiety that I want equalized.
Agree.
I'm not suffering from what my ancestors went through.
I noticed that I've not been allowed to respond.
Or from the Romans. In other words, where do you take this? I mean, should I now be feeling pain from what the Romans did to this country?
In terms of slavery, I can take it to 2015, when the slave owners were compensated by the government. So I can take it to that extent.
Where does your personal pain go?
And I can say to you that I don't think that apologising is a bad thing. I think that apologising for a wrong is a good thing. I think that
if you're dealing with people who are otherwise on your side and want to maintain cooperation with you, you don't apologize to an invading army, whether that invading army is warring against you physically or socially.
Dutch royal family have done a fantastic thing in acknowledging what has gone wrong.
Okay, I hear you, but I honestly think it'll make no difference at all.
Well, that's that. But you know what? Douglas showed us there what works against these people. They're acting on the plane of status trading, the economics of status. They're not talking about legal discrimination, but they want you to think they are so that they can undermine you. All right, I hope you found that informative and entertaining, especially the first part where we picked apart the words that she was using and the way she structured them into a social psychosocial manipulation. That's very important. Go back and listen to that again, and the political debates we have from this point forward will make a lot more sense to you.